Good evening and welcome to TABA. This evening we welcome Valentine from Talking Win UK. Sai is the founder and CEO of Speaking Win UK, who provide a motivational speaking service for young people and adults alike. Sai suffers from glossophobia, which is a fear of public speaking, which we will touch on a little bit later on in the interview. Sai, good evening and welcome to TABA, mate. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Davey.
Not a problem. What I'd like to do, Sai, is go back just to the beginning and get a bit of your background and stuff like that, if that's okay with you, mate.
Great, yeah. When I was in my teens, I wanted to be a sportsman. So I played county cricket, county basketball. I was a squash coach, football coach. So I played a lot of sport. Realised I wasn't good enough to, get to professional level, and then started to look at going into acting when I was about 17. I did a few amateur plays. I auditioned for National Youth Theatre, and surprisingly, I got in. I didn't have much training, but I got in, went down to London, started doing Shakespeare plays, stage plays in London. And for me sins, met Daniel Craig, the current 007. So I did a Shakespeare play in the first year with Daniel Craig, the current 007. He never killed me, never shot me. He never mentioned shaken, not stirred. He was actually the first person I met because his mum was best mates with my drama teacher. So they arranged for us to meet up. Started doing the acting for about 3 years. Got a little bit disillusioned with doing stage acting. I was found it quite difficult. I had to manage my nerves, and I've been on a 20-year journey to manage my nerves, and I'm sure we'll touch on it later. So I came out of acting when I was about 21, something like that, and started volunteering on a youth programme, working with children and young people. And as a volunteer, I worked for about 10 years, and I found my niche very quickly. And I've stayed in the youth sector ever since. I've worked as a learning mentor in education, manage big children's programs, and then for the last 10 years I've supported the NCS National Citizen Service Programme, where I've engaged about 10,000 school leavers every year. So that's going in. Imagine, I don't know if you do it, whoever's listening to this, if you've done any kind of public speaking before, but going in, talking to 100, 200, sometimes 300 school leavers, 16, 17-year-olds, and trying to engage with them and build a rapport and a connection in a couple of minutes, and then win them over and sign them up to a national programme. So one of the biggest challenges I've ever had, but I've been in the youth sector for many years, and then I was having a lot of success there. And then as a result of that, I set up Speaking Win, founded this glossophobia company, because I found that, there was a massive gap, especially for young people back in the early days where they were struggling to speak. And if you improve your speaking skills, I knew it would help these young people, thousands of young people, with their employability skills. Because if you improve your face-to-face speaking skills, you're giving yourself a great chance for work, but also in your personal life. And then just in the last few years, we've started doing adult workshops as well. So that's how we get to today, Davey.
Cool. So with glossophobia, Sai, what is it, mate? I've read up about it, but it's not really something that I would have known as a phobia, if you like, without reading up about it.
Yeah. Surprisingly, David, even with me doing acting and doing lots of workshops and presentations for years, I'd never really heard of it until 7-8 years ago. So glossophobia it's an actual fear of speaking, and there's lots of fear charts. People are afraid of spiders and the dark and heights. In all the fear charts around the world, especially in the English-speaking countries, number 2 is usually death, and number 1 is the fear of speaking. So one of the massive sorts of coaching points in our workshops is we put these, the top 10 fear charts up on the screen, and we say, look at the numbers here, look at the order. Number 2 is fear of death, but number 1 is fear of speaking. What does that say? And I just say, that's absolutely nuts. It's insane that people fear death more than they fear speaking. So some people would say, the thought of having to speak to 100 people, if I had to go and do a presentation, some people would say I'd have a panic attack, I'd have a meltdown, I'd feel sick, I'd feel nauseous, I'd get knots in my stomach, my blood vessels would constrict, I'd feel dizzy. And people are saying, I'd rather just, I could just shut my eyes, go sleep, be dead in a box, thanks very much, than suffer the humiliation or the rejection of having to do a talk and face the judgment of 100 people, maybe the possible shame of 100 people watching me, is far worse than death itself. So that was one of the reasons I actually set up the company, because, you know, over 20 years ago, I suffered with nerves myself. So I've been on a 20-year journey myself to see how I can beat my nerves, how I can beat my own glossophobia. And I don't stand up in the workshops and say, I'm a great presenter or I'm a better speaker. I just say, I found a way to beat my own nerves, beat my own glossophobia. And you can do it too if you follow some basic techniques.
So, did you get diagnosed with it, Si? Is it something you get diagnosed
No,
with?
it's not a medical issue at all. It's just like, so say you have like claustrophobia or any other phobias. Glossophobia is just the official fear of speaking. Glosso is taken from the Greek, so glosso is for tongue. So it's literal, and phobia is fear and dread. So glossophobia is just the official name for someone who gets anxious or stressed or worried or upset before they go to do a talk to a group or even just one-to-one. I mean, I'm sure that, you know, that there's times you know, Davey, if you think back about your life and career, and for people listening, it's not just presenting to a group. Times when you've been speaking to one-to-one and you've said to yourself, you've looked back and thought, I should have said something to that person, and you haven't said it because you've been fearful of the answer you were going to get, the reaction, the rejection possibly. So it's speaking to a group, speaking to one-to-one. It's the amount of fear, and it's the physiological changes that it induces when we think or plan or prepare to go and speak. That's what glossophobia actually is. It's the thought, it's the mental state. I'm going to do a talk, I'm going to do a presentation, and then we have this meltdown and we change completely. Our heart starts beating out of our chest. We feel sick. We feel like we want to throw up. That's glossophobia, David.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen in the past when people are presenting, and you can just freeze up on the spot as well, can't you? And I suppose that's one of the fears of it. But going back to it, so you said you'd done a lot of sports now as a youngster.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel that when you got onto a sports band? Or could you speak to people quite freely there?
Yeah, I mean, as a young lad and a teenager, I was a great communicator, I was a great motivator, I tried to lead well, you know, I captained lots of sides, I captained my county at cricket, and we won my local team, we won at Old Trafford, the big, massive county competition, so I was great, you know, motivating and talking and communicating one-to-one to a team. But then when you throw me on a stage in London in the West End, and we went over to Barcelona, did a massive show, got a lead role in Barcelona at the side. I mean, to do Shakespeare, Davey, you know, it's I struggle to speak English, never mind Shakespeare. It's like talking a foreign language. So just trying to remember the lines and deliver the Shakespeare and all the other points for the stage show. I was quite nervous. I was literally shaking. And so it took me years to work out how to deal with my nerves. Some people can walk on, not a problem. Some people a bit more nervous, and that was me. But over the years, with lots and lots of work, lots of repetition, lots of practice, I've managed to overcome it.
Yeah. So did it manifest, like, I'm trying to think of a question here. So when you started doing the stage work, is that when you realised how bad it actually was with you? Or is this like something that maybe went back to like school days, or that when you had to stand in front of the class
I think,
or something like that?
Because I asked the question in our workshops, and I say, one of the questions I asked with our co-presenters, I say, I want you to, it's a very difficult question to answer, Davey, and I'm going to ask it you, and it's really difficult, and you might not be able to answer it tonight, but try your best, because it actually took me weeks and months to come up with the answer. Because it's very personal, very individual, it's unique, because it's our own individual experience. So I asked the question, can you remember a time when you were first aware of being afraid or worried to speak in public or one-to-one? Can you remember a time with your child or a teen or an adult? And for me, I go back to, I remember, I think, the earliest times was when I was a kid with my mum. My mum was a lovely woman, but she had a fierce temper like a volcano. She had a very strict upbringing, and if anything upset me mum, she would fly off the handle. And I can remember as when I was in primary school, if I said the wrong thing to my mum, she would literally erupt. So I had to learn very quickly what I said would have consequences. So at an early age, I was fearful of speaking, and I'm fearful of consequences. But then I suppose it manifested itself massively. There was two other key moments after that. I was 15 in school doing my English. It was O levels back then. I'm old enough to do the O levels. And we were doing our O-level class, and the English teacher got us to read out from a book. We were studying a poem by this poet, and I started to read out, and I wasn't a very good reader, Davy. I never practiced, and I wasn't really good at reading out. I could read and write, but I'd never really practiced it. So I started reading out, and I was spluttering, and I was stammering, and it was rubbish, and it was painful. And he went, "Valentine, that's absolutely pathetic. You can't even read. You're a disgrace, son." And absolutely slaughtered me in front of the whole class. And I was humiliated. I was devastated. I was like, I was absolutely on the floor. And I went away from that day crushed and embarrassed and humiliated because of that, because he slaughtered me in front of all my schoolmates and friends. But I went away and practiced. And that was, I suppose, the start of me kicking back against my nerves around speaking. And then I suppose a couple of years later, 17, 18, going down to London, doing Shakespeare in the West End and doing these Shakespeare plays, I was quite nervous. I was like physically shaking in the wings, waiting to go on. And I saw how my nerves would manifest themselves. And that's where I started to look at how can I get around this and beat this and become a more confident speaker and presenter.
Do you think that balking at school played a part in that? Because obviously reading Shakespeare, it's its own language, really, isn't it? And you've got to read completely different to, I'd imagine, out of a school book. Do you think that played a part in the nerves getting a bit worse?
No, I don't think they were linked at all. I just think it was a massive sort of turning point for me, and that was I realised I needed to improve my reading skills and my speaking skills, and so I started working on myself at least for a couple of years. So then when I started to do the acting, I was very confident. I started doing stage plays, but then going to do Shakespeare it was another few levels on top of that day because it was so hard. But yeah, I'd started working on it for a few years to get around it.
Yeah, that's good, mate, because obviously what you've done with it is really good. So bring us up to the day, the sort of work you're doing with the youth. What was the award for, Si?
Say again, mate. No, so the award was for I delivered a personal development program for a group of disaffected students. So I was delivering it with a police officer, and it was for Liverpool City Council, and we took 12 very disaffected. There were 14, 15-year-olds. Some of them didn't want to come into school. Some of them had major problems. A lot of them had multi-agency support. So we'd be sitting around the table with the NHS, the police, social services, CAMS, ed psychologists, the NHS, all kinds of professionals trying to support these kids. Some of them were school phobic. Some of them we couldn't even get into school. Some of them were on the child protection register, had major problems, massive safeguarding issues. And we were tasked to try and deliver a personal development program to help these young people with a view to get them back into school and try and help them get some kind of qualifications to help make them more employable and give them some kind of normality in their adult life. And so we decided to create some common ground and to make a connection, we decided to, as part of the program, we'd encourage the young people to sign up to the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. And one young girl who was very needy, she was on the child protection register. She had a terrible, terrible life. And me and my colleague were just very worried about her safety, really. Just keeping her safe was a bit of a challenge. Anyway, we got her onto this programme, onto the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. And for her physical activity that she had to do, there's 4 parts to the programme. She joined the dragon boating team, the North West England dragon boating team, and she started practicing at the Albert Dock in Liverpool. And because she was an absolute fighter and a scrapper, because of her situation, because she was a tough nut, because she'd had to become very resilient with the brothers and sisters and the horrendous situations and trauma that she'd had to face, she was an absolute battler. So when they're banging on the drum saying faster, faster, she's absolutely giving it beans and leaving everyone in a wake. And she worked so hard, she got into the Great Britain team. She got to the Great Britain dragon boating team, the girls team, and the next year it was the World Championships in Australia. She got picked to go to Australia. She'd never been on a plane before, We fundraised £3,000 for us. And she stepped on a plane for the first time in Australia, went and competed against the Chinese and the Canadians. When she got home, news spread. She went down to St. James's Palace, gave a talk, an inspirational talk in front of Prince Edward. And then she was invited to the Grosvenor Hotel, spoke in front of about 700, 800 international business leaders, and told the story and how this personal development youth program had changed her life. So that was what the award was for. And I've always found that personal development programs and making a connection has been so important. So over 20, nearly 30 years now working with young people, it's finding that common ground, finding a way that you can engage with young people, and personal development programs like the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, like National Citizen Service, like the Army Cadets, military cadets, so crucial to helping youth workers and professionals build those linking connections with young people.
See, you're saying over 30 years of doing stuff like that, and that's absolutely amazing, mate, because there's so many kids get left behind, really, don't they? Over the sort of 30 years, what sort of changes have you seen? And obviously, knife crime, where I'm from, has always been quite massive. And then over the sort of past maybe 10 years, you hear more and more about it on the news. But what sort of challenges, like for 30 years ago, do you face worse today, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's a lot harder for young people now. And I think what's sad is, knife crime and gun crime, it saddens me to see that's on the increase, Davey. I know it was there, and I'm sure in your experience it was there 20, 30 years ago. It's on the increase. You only have to put the news on now. It's everywhere, isn't it? It's all over the news. I think the biggest change for me is the internet and cyberbullying. And it's a whole new world, it's absolutely enormous, and it's very, very difficult to manage. And there's so many stories of young people and even adults getting bullied and traumatized online. So you've got all the old problems that we had 10, 20, 30 years ago. And now with all the online issues, it's double trouble, really. It really is. I do feel for young people. It's really, really tough.
Yeah, it's such a good tool, but it can be used for both sort of good and evil.
Yeah,
really.
I agree totally. Yeah, it's an amazing tool for good, but also the negative side, the toxic side, it can be fatal, which is so sad.
Yeah. So in terms of your sort of groups we're speaking, and we'll touch a wee bit back on that in a minute, Si, because I'll tell you a bit about my background another time, but I grew up in quite a rough area, and I like to find out about other people's experience over that sort of period, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But with the company at the moment, Speaking Win, what sort of things are you doing at the moment for sort of youth and also adult groups? Because there's a lot of young adults, who have, like I say, they get left behind as a youngster, who are now playing catch up with everybody else.
Well, my next workshop is I've been asked to speak to 1,000 young people in one day in Macclesfield in Cheshire. So in about 10 days' time, I'm going over to an academy. I'm going to speak to 1,000 students from like 13-year-olds up to 16-year-olds, and 4 one-hour presentations, 250 students in each presentation, and an employability presentations and the part of Work Experience Week. It's National Work Experience Week in a couple of weeks. And so the theme and the whole point of the presentations is to focus on employability skills, but leaning on speaking skills and stressing and emphasizing how important it is to focus on your face-to-face speaking skills. Because when young people do that, they're going to give themselves a massive chance of being employed in the future. I'm very I use a lot of slides. There's a lot of visuals. I'm a very sort of a visual coach. And I put up lots of content to say that all the top employers around the country, around the world, they're looking for a certain set of skills. I sound like Liam Neeson not taking it. A certain set of skills. So future employees, they're always looking for, great communicators, team players, reliable, hardworking. But what I say is your face-to-face speaking skills, it's like a non-negotiable. If you haven't got that, doesn't matter how good you are technically, you could be 9, 10 out of 10 in your field. You could be the best bricklayer, you could be the best surgeon, you can be top of your game. But if your face-to-face speaking skills are a 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10, you're never going to have the success. You know, you're never going to have true success. You've got to try and be 9, 8, 9, 10 out of 10 in either area. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on. So focusing on speaking skills with the sort of overarching coaching is employability. And
I suppose that's another thing that this is taken away in it. It's like being able to speak face to face with somebody. It's a lot easier for young kids these days just to do it like we're doing it now, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's something that might be difficult to do.
Yeah.
So you're going to speak in front of 1,000 people?
1,000 students, yeah.
1,000 students. So do you still get nervous about doing that, Si?
Yeah, I do get a little bit of nerves. So the nerves have reduced, but that's because I've practiced and repeated, you know, my craft thousands and thousands of times. And the brain experts say that the emotion of fear and excitement are very, very similar. So I think I've got a little bit of nerves, a little bit of excitement, knowing that I can deliver something absolutely amazing, inspirational, transformational. But also there's a bit of nerves because, you know, there's a lot on the line because you're only as good as your next delivery, as your next coaching, as your next workshop. So for me, it's not about resting on laurels. And for over 20 years, I've always been quite brutal with the workshops and presentations and sessions and events that I've delivered and said, okay, well, what worked well? What can improve? You know, what can we do better next time? And really trying to set the bar as high as I can every single time. So the next time, what can we do better? How can we, you know, improve this? So there will be some nerves and there will be some excitement, but it's reduced. I mean, 20 years ago, if you'd have asked me to do this 20, 30 years ago, I'd have literally been shaking in the wings before it went on. I don't think I could have got my words out. So it's just a lot of practice, a lot of repetition, Davey.
Yeah, it's like the duck, innit? You keep calming the outside and you're flapping away underneath just to keep going.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, exactly. People, a lot of things we do in the military, it's talking in front of people. And when you touched earlier on Army cadets, I done a cadet training team for 3 years, and they do the Duke of Edinburgh and stuff like that as well. And they got up and talk in front of people, and you can see the confidence that brings for people.
Yeah.
So obviously getting people into that sort of arena is quite good. But is there any other ones? And I know Liverpool's quite big and on quite a lot of stuff. They've got all the MMA stars now that have come together at the moment as well, and they try and get knives and stuff off the street. Are you involved with any of them? Are you going to try and get involved?
No, but I've got colleagues and friends who are involved in knife crime. Not involved in knife crime. Involved in, you know, reducing knife crime and gun crime. My cousin actually delivers an amazing program, and he goes into schools and he's worked with lots of amazing agencies and partners, and he's a top medical specialist, and he's worked in A&E for over 20 years. And he goes, I've sat in his presentations, and he goes around and he just tells stories of A&E, of mainly young lads coming into A&E with arrows sticking out of them, several bullet wounds, several knife wounds. And he talks about this, and it's quite brutal and quite matter of fact. And and he says at the start, he has to do a bit of a warning at the start. He says, if you feel queasy at any time, just please go out, get some air. Every single presentation he does, people are going out. Because he won't be too graphic, but it's you know, these are real life photos of people who have come in a terrible state to A&E, and he'll literally say, now, what do you think happened to this person? Do you think they lived, or do you think they died? And he tells them the backstory. And sometimes it'll just be a little scratch, a little tiny knife wound. And many times the person's gone on to die. And then another person's coming with a couple of massive arrows sticking out of him. He's coming with 8 bullet wounds in, and the lad sort of survived. And what he said is, if you align yourself with a gang, if you get in with the wrong people, the likelihood is, you know, you'll start carrying, if you start carrying a knife for protection, the likelihood is someone's going to use a knife on you. If you start using a gun for protection, someone's going to use a gun on you. And he gives all these stats, massive stats, to say that, you know, if you start getting involved with a gang or using knives and guns, the chances of you know, being fatally wounded are absolutely massive. And he does an incredible program. It's our Rob Jackson. He's my cousin, And he's incredible. He works in Manchester now, but he was at Liverpool A&E for like 20 years. But the stories are incredible. He's been all over the country. He's spoken for the BBC, for radio. Does an amazing job, dealing with knife and gun crime.
I think sometimes hard truth is the way to go into it. I mean, there's lots of different programs out there for people to try and get to, but sometimes hard truth, hard facts, showing them this is what will happen. Maybe sometimes that's a kick up the arse they need.
Yeah.
So speaking one itself, how long do you say that's going? 7 years is that's going for?
5 years ago, I founded the company, Davey, 5 years ago. Just as we went into lockdown. So what they say is they say 80% of small businesses fail in the first 2 years. So add to that global pandemic as I launched the company. Oh my days!
I was going to touch on that because I want to ask you. I'll get to it in a minute, but I want to ask you about that and how that works with your sort of line of work. But the idea then obviously came from your own sort of background with nerves and stuff like that. But how did it all come about that you set the business up and went ahead with it?
So I started having a lot of success for the last 10 years delivering this national programme. So my challenge was to go in. I had to engage 10,000 school leavers every year. So if you can imagine going into a school, I'll give you an example. Imagine Crewe in Cheshire, bottom of Cheshire, 216-year-olds. Imagine, put yourself in these shoes. You're standing in front of 216-year-olds you've never met before. They don't know you. You're going to sign them to a national programme or encourage them to sign them to a personal development programme. I'm even as a confident person, even having worked with young people for 20 years, I found it very, very difficult to start with because you're standing there and it's that fear of judgment, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, and all the glossophobia issues of, I had to deal with all those issues very, very quickly. Because if I didn't get their attention and connect and build rapport within a few minutes, you've lost them. And literally the tumbleweed will start going and you'll just want the ground to open up and swallow you. So I started using quite innovative techniques to build bridges, to build connection, to build rapport. I started doing things other presenters weren't doing. Started on a lot of success, and then I got invited to London at a national level. They asked, could they record my presentations and look at my engagement techniques, and we shared that with they had about 200 presenters around the country, shared it with them. And so I thought, well, I'm having a lot of success here. Is there a way I could set a business up using these skills, using this model that I've set up? And that's where I had the idea, because what I was promoting was personal development. It was could have set up a business that looked at personal development but was focusing on the speaking skills, using these kind of innovative techniques and engagement tools that I'd used. I was making it fun. There was a lot of music. There was a lot of humour. Very straight talking. Dave, I know you like your straight talking. Very direct. But saying, if you follow these simple steps, you're going to give yourselves a great chance. And obviously being passionate about working with young people for the past 20 years, it made sense to start doing workshops with young people. And then that grew into working with adults, workshops in the last couple of years.
So where did you feel like you're most nervous? In front of the 216-year-olds or sort of 20, 30 adults? I can tell you where I'd probably think these 16-year-olds are either going to turn me off in a minute, they're going to just tell me to piss off in a minute and no listen to me. Whereas 20 adults, they'll want to listen for at least 2 minutes.
Yeah,
so where were you on that sort of?
Whether it's youth or adult workshop, neither of them faze me. I'll tell you where the nerves come in, Davey, and this is my secret. I'll share it with you and share it with the listeners. The times I get nervous is when I haven't done my preparation. Right. And if I'm not prepared, that's when the worry about falling flat on my face, not looking professional, not being impactful, dying on my arse, that's where the nerves build. So the way I found to reduce my nerves is make sure I know. I've practiced some presentations literally hundreds of times to make sure my nerves are reduce all my stress and anxiety, and then my confidence has gone through the roof. And that's been the key for me, Davey.
Yeah. 7 P's we work on in the army. Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
There you go. Exactly that. Exactly that, Davey.
No, that's good, mate. I thought I'd ask that question though, because I mean, Sometimes it's harder to grasp, to grip the 16-year-olds in, but
yeah,
that's a good
but
point.
because I've delivered hundreds of workshops around the country to hundreds and hundreds of young people and adults, that doesn't faze me now. What does faze me is, am I prepared? Do I know my content? Do I know my content? Is it going to be smooth? Am I going to do a good job? So I'm setting the bar very high, and if it doesn't go as well as I've planned, that's because in my opinion, I haven't, planned and prepared. So there's a lot of planning, a lot of preparation goes into every workshop.
Yeah, happy days, mate. So, like I said, I was going to ask you this. COVID, how did it? I mean, how did you keep the company going through COVID when
it's just good old-fashioned determination, resilience, isn't it? All the media outlets were saying, "Oh, the whole world's shutting down, the whole country's shutting down." I'm thinking, what's going to happen here? But because the model that I was using was very, very different. There was humour, there was music. It was very live. It was very interactive. We were using challenges and activities and getting people moving. It just took off. And because we were connected to a national youth organisation, we started delivering workshops right across the country, and it just snowballed. So in a weird way, Davey, COVID actually helped us, because lots of other workshops and engagement programs were shutting down, and we just flourished. So it was a massive blessing in disguise, really. I mean, it was an absolute miracle as far as I'm concerned.
And did you just bang everything straight online as well, the same as everybody else?
No, we didn't. I mean, we did a little bit of Instagram, but it was just word of mouth, really. We were working with a massive national network that got 100,000 young people onto a program every year, and word just spread. And it was that program was delivered across lots of different regions. All the different regions heard about it, and we're getting calls, "Can you come here, come there?" And we're up and down the country delivering the workshops. So it just grew, just snowballed.
See, at the height of COVID and stuff like that, though, we used doing like workshops online, or we used actually going to this?
No, obviously when it was complete lockdown, we couldn't do anything. But that was a small window. I mean, the 2-year COVID period, it was on off. So it was around the periods where we were allowed to deliver. And then when we were allowed to deliver, when it was in COVID with all the restrictions, it had to be, we had to be so many feet away from the person. The number of people in the workshop was reduced. We had to wear masks. We had to follow all the protocols, etc. So that was really hard. And quite a lot of workshops got cancelled as well, which was an absolute killer. And as you're aware, Davey, and your listeners will be aware, lots of businesses went under. So I'm just very grateful and feel really blessed that we didn't go under, even though, lots and lots of, and we spent months and months and months in the planning for some of these workshops all over the country. They got cancelled, and we were absolutely devastated. But we just kept going. We just kept going, Davey.
See what you're saying there about the wearing the masks and stuff like that in workshops. Did you find that people were, and I say people, some people were more confident talking with the mask on and some with the mask off? Because sometimes if you're sort of covered up, you do feel more confident in yourself. You don't think people can fully see you.
Yeah.
Did you ever find that? Did you ever notice
It's a really good question. And I think, answering from my experience, I would say yes. Like if I'm feeling a bit low, a bit crappy one day, I'll stick a baseball cap, stick my sunglasses on. It's a bit of a disguise, isn't it? A bit of a barrier. And I'm sure, people feel like that. I've got something to hide behind. So, yeah, I suppose the mask with some people would have definitely helped.
Yeah, I'm going to ask that because obviously when in the army, one of the things that you do to sort of change your persona is you put camp team on your face. And that changes you from me talking to somebody to somebody who's fairly aggressive, it gives you that air of confidence about you. And that's the way I've always thought about it. And I was wondering that.
Great question.
So in terms of speaking one itself, how many staff have you got on board with you?
So we have a team of 10 co-presenters. And what we do, whether it's a youth workshop or an adult workshop, I've got presenters in the 20s, I've got presenters in the 40s, near 50s, and I will pick a co-presenter who's suited to the age group we're working with to make sure that I always deliver quality. I always lead every workshop to make sure we have that consistency, that quality. But because the workshops are so big now, I always have at least one or two like when we go and work with these 1,000 students in a couple of weeks' time, there'll be 4 of us going. So it just depends on the numbers, but there's always at least 2 of us there, 2, maybe 3.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you're looking to grow that in the future as well.
Oh, I'd love to grow it. Yeah, love to grow that. Yeah, lots of plans.
I mean, looking at in a 5-year period, you're national, mate, and you've got like 100,000, over 1,000 people.
We've spoken to over 75,000 young people and adults face to face. Yeah,
and what's the sort? Go on, sorry.
Yeah, and that was in COVID as well. And if we hadn't had COVID, the numbers, would have probably, nearly doubled.
Yeah. So I think we've got to a decent point there, mate. And in terms of the glossophobia side, that, like I say, that's real news to me. I've read a bit about it since I knew we were going to talk, and it's not something you hear a lot of. And actually, I've seen people completely freeze.
Yeah.
Something as simple as a question can just put you straight off, and you just stop and you blank, start sweating, like you say, and stuff like
that.
Yeah. If you get in it, you want to squeeze it and to finish up with,
Yeah, just a little tip for you. This is for you, Davey, and for any listeners. So again, we look at the science and the psychology of speaking. We look at the history, where it comes from. And so a little tip for you. When we feel nervous before, if we have to do a presentation or speak to a group or speak to one-to-one, say you'd have to give someone bad news, but it's a one-to-one conversation, and we start to feel, anxious, the heart's pounding, sweaty palms, you feel like you want to throw up. The point I'd like to make is scientifically, if you look at somebody who is about to go into fight mode, so say a building was going to collapse on you, or a vicious dog was going to attack you, or you were going to have a fight with somebody over some issue, the brain's number one function is to keep us alive. So when we go into a dangerous situation, the brain's always looking for change. The brain's always looking to, how can I keep you alive? Now, when you go into those situations with, a fallen building, or, say a tiger was coming to attack you, your heart would pound, your sweaty palms, you'd want to throw up, you'd feel nauseous. Well, they're all the same physiological changes that you have before you go to speak. It's exactly the same. And so the trick to remember is, and it's changing our mental state. When we feel nervous and we feel sick before we go to speak, we just need to remember there's a part in the brain called the amygdala, and it's responsible for triggering your fight, flight, freeze response, which you mentioned before. We go into fight or flight mode. You know all about it with your military career. You know all about fight and flight, Davey. I'm not even going to dream to coach it on that, but you know all about it's fight or flight. You stand and fight, or you run off. And so when we go to speak and we start to feel nauseous, we need to have a word with ourselves and say, there's no tiger coming to kill us. There's no building coming down, collapsing on us. It's your brain. You've probably got a sensitive amygdala, a sensitive brain response. It's a false trigger. And just have a word with yourself. Say, there's no danger. It's calm. You're going to speak. You're not going to die. No one's going to kill you. You're just giving a talk, or you're having a one-to-one conversation, and calm yourself. And I've found over the last few years myself having that conversation, and my 10 co-presenter team, 10 strong co-presenter team, and that's what we coach now. Now, again, we deliver that coaching over a day or two. But just to give you a little tip, go and research, go and look at fight or flight mode and fear of speaking, because it's the same response. And when we understand why we feel sick, why we feel nauseous, when we understand it's just our brain looking for change, looking to see is there any danger, and it's getting ready to go into fight or flight mode, we just need to calm ourselves down. And it's been so empowering and liberating, Davey, over the last few. I've only been using this content for the last few years. It's reduced my anxiety and stress massively, and my confidence has gone through the roof with regards to speaking.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Si.
Great, mate.
Si, what I'll do is when I put the video out, I'll put on the links to your email address and stuff like that.
Brilliant.
We'll plug it on Facebook, LinkedIn, or the usual sites. Si, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on TABA, Tell All By All. It's a really good insight into something that a lot of people know but don't know the actual knowledge behind it. So I'm sure that'll help a lot of people. Thanks very much.
Really enjoyed it, Davey. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, mate.